My name is Ashish. I'm from LifeSite. Angelina, you've been primarily, in the advertising space for pretty much 3 decades from now, 3 decades, and you've had extensive experiences being in agencies, working with clients, now pretty much setting the standards in the ecosystem around how people should really go about their measurements. So this is going to be a really exciting art. A lot of VPs, a lot of CMOs and performance marketers have been looking forward to this. So while we do wait for people to join in, we'll just get started with the question that I had in mind, from the past 1 year, because we've been working with clients, we've been working with brands, we've been working with agencies. So, we've all of us have sailed through the ship in this ecosystem pretty much with a lot of privacy regulations. We still are, going towards a lot of how to tackle those challenges. And then Apple coming in, doing their bit, wall gardens really not helping out anymore. So pretty much all in all, I think there is signal loss happening when it comes to people, really finding that data when it comes to accurately measuring their campaigns. So what have your observations been over the past 1 year in terms of some of the challenges that you have seen, some of the patterns that you have seen across advertisers and media buyers out there?
Well, thank you for having me, and really appreciate having me speak about this topic because I'm very passionate about it. So some of the trends, or I would say some of the things that, especially here at the IAB, that we have observed is a couple of things, right? There's a lot of investment that we're seeing in data clean rooms and first party data, and shifting a lot of their spend more into the walled gardens. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with companies feeling a bit wary about what the future landscape of digital advertising is that they'll be facing moving forward. With the deprecation of cookies and privacy regulations, they feel that a lot of the walled gardens, including retail media networks, have a huge first-party data graph and is able to help marketers target audiences through that first-party data linkage. However, one of the things that I think is really important to think about is it's going to get harder and harder, as not only within the US, we're seeing different state regulations around data privacy and consumer data, but we're also seeing at a global scale. And there's going to be limitations of how companies are going to be leveraging that first party data. I think there's going to be a significant push in terms of getting consumers to opt in to allowing companies to leverage that first party data, not only for targeting, but for measurement purposes. So especially in the US, there are some states where it's saying that combining data sets, they can only do it in aggregate, or they need permissions of the users to actually do so if they want a deterministic approach to measuring if a person has been delivered or viewed an ad to getting onto a brand's website and then converting, right? And being able to link that conversion to exposure. You can do it now, right? Because there's still some data signals that you can leverage. Things like a confirmation ID coming from the ad servers that allow you to link that, hey, I might not be able to identify the actual person through a cookie or through an email address, but through a confirmation ID, I can link that, hey, this exposure was converted with this, and they converted with this order ID. So therefore, I know exactly the person behind that confirmation ID, right? So there's that. But moving forward, that may not be the case. So things like conversion, confirmation ID, email addresses and such, there might be limits to being able to use that data to actually measure to outcomes and linking it back to the actual person. So a thing to also be concerned about is that things, if Apple iOS is any indication of consumers opting in to personalized ads or tracking, that's around between 20 to 30%, right, of Apple iOS users have permitted the app tracking transparency protocol. And if we move towards the open web, via the browser and require that users opt in, we're probably going to see the same thing when asked to, can we use your first party data to do the same? So there's that concern. Publishers also are not increasing their first party data sets as rapidly as advertisers. So match rates are going to be difficult because right now we've heard that publishers have anywhere between around 20 to 30% of their users are known, right? They're either registering or subscribing or have converted, right? But there's that 70 to 80% that are going to be completely unknown. So you're not going to be able to identify and match those users through a deterministic way. So that's one trend that we're seeing, is that this need for more first-party data. However, I think marketers need to think about that their first-party data is gold, but it's table stakes for many, but it may not be as scalable, and it may not be your golden ticket to actually attributing conversions.
I can understand this because there's only few things that you can maybe enrich along with getting all the data from different sources and then map it to that customer ID and maybe even send it to all of your ad platforms to increase those conversions for you. But that's not going to cut it, right? Because in the end, you are going towards different places to really show your ads, and the data available from these places may not be that accurate. And still, we will see a lot of ad wastage coming forward even as well, because in the end, you still will be finding it hard to attribute to that entire journey, right? What a customer, when a customer discovers your brand, or comes to your website, or even goes to your email and then finally purchases, right? So there's a lot of permutation combinations across the board right now, and this is the problem. I think majority of us are trying to tackle. And then when it comes to really solving this, because we are here to talk about what are the proactive measures people need to take before 2024 starts, so that in the end, whatever they faced from the last 2 years, with all of these things happening, should really not repeat, and they should start the signs of profitability tying up and making sure that all of their ad dollars are really getting that, not just return on ad spend, but in the end also a good customer value at the end of the day. Because in the end, it's also about increasing that lifetime when it comes to the retention end of the spectrum, right? So when it comes to this space, there's been a lot of talk around media mix modeling coming back, right? Marketing mix modeling coming back. A lot of even Facebook and Google, all of them are adopting MMM already, right? To build their own platforms, and then we're seeing agencies who work with large retailers already do this for them. But because it's such a heavy cost involved in doing modeling, there is a lot of problems still with a large set of other brands and advertisers to do it. And I think one of the things that we're trying to solve is around the same line. But my question comes back to this whole shift towards, hey, I cannot really trust attribution modeling anymore. I really have to look for my truth in other places. Do you see this happening across the board, or it's still in bits and pieces?
I think they're still in bits and pieces. There is, there's still a lot of fragmentation in the marketplace, and it's not going to get any better. Unfortunately, it's not going to get any better. What I think that, I think there are definitely some advancements that we're hearing, at least from the IB. We don't have any data, right? So we don't, none of our members provide us with any of their campaign data. So we're not privy to actually seeing what results are happening out there and what media plans look like. But, based on our conversations, is that previous, or, media mix modeling, how we've done it in the past is very outdated. And I think one of the things that we don't do very well is really bringing ad tech and MarTech data together and really looking, right? So when you have an agency that's running a media campaign, they're looking at their ad server, their programmatic platform, their social media, right? And so therefore they see the conversion data in separate buckets. When you use an ad server, there's a bit of what I'll call source of truth, because if you have an ad server, which I highly recommend, right, and it's centralized where it's trying to track all the media activity, you get to one sense of source of truth. But given the fact that data signals are on the rise with Privacy Sandbox, with Apple iOS, that a lot of the conversion data is not going to be captured in there. As a good example, when I was running campaigns for a retailer or a CPG brand or financial services, if you think about what click-through rates look like, right, 0.02% click-through rates, maybe best, the highest that in latest might be as high as 2%. More than 98% of users don't click on an ad. So, and they may wind up, or if they do, right, they may still do a search on the internet. And then if someone clicks on a search ad, then that search gets the accredited for that conversion. So but you need to like look at it from your MarTech standpoint, right? And when I think of data modeling, it's more at the aggregate level, and really seeing the overall impact of when you increase spend or you increase media in certain other channels. What activities are you seeing on your website? What activities are you seeing in your call center? Are those on the rise? And if there's a way of having some sort of like coupon code or campaign code that people can enter and say, hey, that might be able to give you an inkling of where perhaps the source of where they saw the ad initially, they can try and credit. But you're going to have to do a lot of inferred analytics, probabilistic analytics. We've been for 20 years, really, embracing big data. But I think there's changes in what that big data is going to look like. So you're not going to be able to see post-view conversions. You're not going to be able to see conversions that are coming through Apple iOS devices from your ad servers, from your ad tech. So you're going to have to look at your MarTech and your CRM and your overall other sales data and kind of make some correlations. And this is where I think AI and artificial intelligence is going to help in looking at what data you're seeing from your media platforms, what data are you seeing from your marketing tech platforms, bringing it all together, and then doing modeling against that in a non-deterministic way.
This sounds like a really amazing solution to have. And two, when it comes to, when we talk to, let's say, a performance marketer or a CMO in a retailer brand, they come up with this huge problem of like, hey, not that I have a problem, I do have a problem of data silos, but I have it at a very bulk amount where, let's say, for example, if I'm talking about a millions of data, right, there are chunks of these in so many different places, right? And pretty much half of their time is spent on, working with data analysts, right? Like who's dealing with these data and then kind of like, again, as you say, correlate, right? Bringing it all in and making sure that, there is low amount of error which has gone through from the place where the data is being taken and it's processed and it's analyzed and it's given, right? So they don't trust their own data, to be really frank, because they know that in the end there's going to be a lot of issues, and all they're trying to go for is, hey, how much more accurate can we get? And I think this is fair as a problem which is trending out there. But what this is costing is a lot of millions of bad money, right? Being really put out there, and I think that's where people are still losing out, on this problem. But coming back to measurement, right? and the effectiveness of how you can do that. So a lot of brands look at revenue KPIs as a really important thing to measure from every initiative, right? But we've seen the rise of uh, brand awareness, brand campaigns as well, becoming as much as important as performance campaigns, right? So people want to track how many people are talking about their brand. People want to track how many people see their digital out of home ads, right? They want to see how many people really saw their TV ad campaign, how many people really heard them on podcasts and radios. But this is all good to have, right? Like the entire industry have been working on this as a good to have, concept. But I think it's slowly turning. But to completely make that change, it all comes down to measurement, right? Because uh, the the like for example, if you're running a out of home campaign and somebody takes a photo of that and put it on social media, right, and goes viral, and then you're running a Google campaign, and in the end, uh, the result or with the result that is coming out of that, uh, the first attribution was done out of home, but in the end, the only thing you're able to track is that Google click, right, which happened, and maybe the search volume increased because of that through the social media post. But here is where the fight happens internally within the marketing team, where the brand guys are like, hey, it's because of us, this is all happening, but they never get to have their say in the meeting. And this really is a huge problem. How do you see both ends of the spectrum when it comes to revenue KPI measurement and non-revenue KPI measurement, really solving the problem of this so that both performance and brand campaigns are equally looked at, are fairly looked at. Like forget about equal, but at least fairly looked at.
The challenge is that many agencies and their teams work in silo. There's a lack of investment in having a centralized analytics team that looks at everything all collectively. Mm-hmm. I think that is right. So you have a programmatic team that runs their own campaigns. They generate their own reports. You have a search team that generates their own reports. You have a social team that reports their own stuff. And so a lot of marketers, when they're requesting reports, they look at it by channel and isolate them by channel. Now that's great when a marketer said, let me understand specifically what are the triggers helping to drive that conversion within each channel. But there should also be a holistic aggregate report at the entire campaign level that compares and shows your media spend and different levels of detail by geography, by location, by audience segments, perhaps even by device in one massive report so that you can kind of see like where those are. Now within digital, again, if you have an ad server, which a lot of advertisers do not invest in, right? So they decide the programmatic team is going to run a trade desk pixel and that's it. Yeah. They'll report on that. But again, if you have like a primary ad server that becomes a source of truth, at least within digital, there are reports in there that show different models based on different touch points. So you can look at it from a first touch or a last touch. You can weight them any way that you want. And even including one of the major ad servers, they do have reports that show, and I might be using the term incorrectly, but it's directly attributed conversions versus non-direct attributed conversions. Mm-hmm. And I would have the team look at that. There's also what we call duplication reports. So if one person or how many impressions were served on site A, but how many of those audiences or impressions were overlapped with site B? So did you actually see that maybe perhaps 20% of your audiences were actually overlapped? They saw an ad on site A and site B. And that's where you do a lot of correlation analysis. And you can do so if you have the teams take a step back and provide a holistic aggregate report by channel or by market and by channel and break it down that way. But a lot of companies do not invest or have staff that supports that type of reporting. It's extensive. It's very labor intensive. And one of the other things that is difficult is that a lot of these teams don't set up campaigns consistently the same way. So what they may call a campaign or a target audience in their ad server may be different from how they've set up their programmatic buys. So it's really important to either have the teams use consistent nomenclatures and taxonomies in these various different platforms, and making sure that whatever you're using as, like, I call them line items, right? Trafficking line items, that if your ad server says, site A underscore 300 by 250 underscore male 25 to 54 underscore, mobile device, that same setup is done on the programmatic side, right? And therefore, when you aggregate these reports, you can parse them out. Now, there are some platforms that don't allow you to create those, what I call labels, right? Those line item labels. Well, this is where then you need an analytics team to deploy some sort of match table and create some sort of identifier key that you can then append to everything within your other platforms, and use that to then say, okay, this one identifier key could be, as an example, an ad server ID line item, right? So placement ID 1275, that 1275, when the programmatic team deploys 1275, you can match and say, these two are the same thing. So therefore I can compare apples to apples. So that's one way of doing it, right? But it requires investments in the proper team structure. You and I talked about this right before this call, that in order to improve measurement, it's not just about the data set, but it's the people behind the keyboard, right? And making sure that you have the proper level of expertise executing those campaigns. I've worked at many of the major holding companies. I've overseen very, very large teams. I led media teams, I ran ad ops, and I partnered with our analytics team, right? So, and one of the main things was that a lot of CMOs and brands want to reduce the non-working media, which is staff and platform fees, right? And move it towards working media dollars. And the challenge with that is that then you're having junior level people deploy your campaign who are 25-year-olds, right? And nothing wrong with 25-year-olds, but I use this analogy, but they can't even balance their own checkbook, right? And so you're reliant on someone who is a junior person to execute these campaigns, and they don't have the experience or the knowledge or the real understanding of the technical challenges and how to operationally improve the data sets, right? So a lot of these people are being trained by supervisors that were trained 2 years ago doing their same job. So it's really important to include in your staff plans a senior level person that oversees it. Many times when I was a VP, I was not funded. So I theoretically was not supposed to work on accounts that I was not funded on, but I oversaw 40 people, right? And over time, my role got eliminated because I was not funded by my clients. So the agencies had to eliminate my role. So now you have these junior folks climbing up the ranks who don't really have the full expertise and knowledge that to stitch everything across multiple channels to then provide the best advice on how to structurally organize the data sets and bring all these data together. And it's also important to have the teams, the analytics team and the ad ops team, be the core centric team that works with all the different media channels and the expertise around to say, hey, the way you're executing things in programmatic doesn't align with the way that we want to look at the data. So there needs to be collaboration between the ad ops and the analytics team very closely, and then work very closely with the media channels to execute those campaigns effectively.
And these processes, systems, and all of this, do you think CMOs are well aware of, or they need to be really we need to go out there and make that happen?
We need to go and make it happen. I mean, when I ran ad operations at Dentsu and Merkle, I had my team in the US in the same office as the media teams and the analytics team. And they were integral to be part of the process from beginning to end. A lot of people consider ad operations as a rote, junior level task that could be outsourced, and nothing wrong with outsourcing or insourcing, by the way, but those people don't become experts in the platforms. They just do, right? So unless you staff directors, VPs, who then understand the technology really well, they can start piecing together and connecting the dots. So
I see some, director of marketing operations roles opening up a lot nowadays, and I think many of the things that they've been given is first to set this up, but it's in very fractions of sorts, and I think moving on we will see just more of this coming through. So okay, so now you said that as a core, you primarily you've done all of that stuff. You've done all of your hashing, mapping, all of that stuff is sorted, right? Now let's go back to the cookieless era, right? Let's go back to what that is going to be bringing into the table next year, right? So we know all of this is going to happen, but and people have started to prep for it, but still, when we did a survey to our folks and to a bunch of them, still I think people are really reluctant on, or they're really scared though, right? There's no 100% yet satisfaction that we are ready, and when we kind of like talk to them a little bit more, it comes with this entire approach of uncertainty, which is something not new to marketers, right? We've gone through a lot of uncertainty for a long time, but this period, right, is really troubling them a lot, and some of the things that they really look forward to, answer is primarily, okay, do we kind of like go and find these solutions ourselves within our team and have somebody come and solve this internally, or do we go out outwardly and find maybe good platforms or maybe better folks who can provide these identifiers, right, which can primarily unify all these touch points, help them to really get that identification piece of it sorted. What do you think is kind of like the sentiment out there?
yeah, so I would say, I concur. Every year we do what we call the IB State of Data Report, and the last 3 years have been really focused on, are you prepared for privacy sandbox and Apple iOS and privacy regulations? And what's interesting is that companies are like rate themselves at a 4, right? 3.5, 4, I would say. But then when we drill down into actual questions, what are you actually doing, right? What are things that you're testing? Where are you investing your dollars? We see that many of them are not prepared, right? And the reason why I'm saying that is, right, they focus on that first party data, and they're thinking that, hey, I need people identifiers. I need identifiers that enable me to identify a person to a conversion. I say, take that, throw it out the window. No, you don't. When back in 1998, when I was doing media plans, you said I was doing this for 3 decades. It's about 3 decades. 1998, CPM rates were pretty much the same. $30, right? $20, right? Programmatic didn't exist. So what we'll consider premium inventory, $20, $30. Click-through rates were much higher. Yes, fine. But we also had post-conversion. But our cost per acquisitions, let's just say for a retailer at the time when I started, was probably between $40 to $80, right? And that's really no different than some of the, cost per conversions or cost per acquisitions, cost per sales that you get right now, right? So it really hasn't changed that much. So you may be able to increase efficiencies by 5%, 25% by identifying very, tactical elements to improve your campaigns. But overall, we have not gone from a $30 cost per acquisition down to a $5 cost per acquisition, right? I don't know any retailer that really has done that, right? And so I think it's a mindset change, that we need identifiers. We need to know exactly how many people have seen our ad. We need to know exactly who those audiences are. Strategies back then can apply to now, what I call the back to the future kind of concept. Cohorts, audience segments, very broad audience segments, don't get niche, but do a lot of creative testing, do a lot of content testing. So dissect your campaigns in terms of not just websites, like news websites and entertainment websites. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about if you're on, the content, the page itself. So are you on a page that is about news or about entertainment or about cooking, right? Is it about chicken recipes? Is it about, desserts? You can go on and on and on. Again, not at the domain level, at the page level. Do creative testing to improve your creative. I worked on craftfoods.com for the CRM Family Magazine, and we were able to improve conversions by 10% each quarter by doing, like, which recipes do we want to test out, different types of recipes. Do we want an image of people in the ad or no people? Do we want to include kids in the ad? Do we not? Do we want to include an entire cake or a slice of a pie, right? And those are where you'll see improvements, not at the overall channel level. So I think we need to move away from, I need accurate data to be able to understand my reach and frequency. No, you don't. What you need to do is do improvements within those channels, but then look at them holistically, like I talked about. And your key, right? What is the identifier? Because there's a question, what identity, what are to unify those touch points is, again, it's at the placement level where you have this taxonomy and nomenclature of who your audience is, what the website, what type of content you're on, what's the ad size, and also leverage a taxonomy for your creative. So identifying different elements of your creative. When you start being able to parse that out, I did it in pivot tables. I did not have BigQuery. I did not have SQL back then. That's where you saw improvements. And I think that, marketers need to get away from, I need these big, I definitely need to know. It's a nice to know. So when you're looking at KPIs, you got your ROAS or your cost per acquisition. Yes, you should be converting that and setting your benchmarks, but you should also be looking at your engagement metrics, your landing page visits, duration time spent with your ads, duration time that's spent with your page on your website. Are they scrolling down on your page? So are the people that's coming from social media, when they get to your website, are they scrolling through your content? Are they looking at multiple pages? And so, but you don't need deterministic data for that, right? And so when it comes to measurement, I'm really passionate about, you can make a lot of improvements in your measurement by creating structure, audit every single campaign, every single platform that's being implemented, audit the people that are managing your campaigns and making sure that those are in an ideal state. Because a lot of times, especially the media planners, they spend more time correcting the data and organizing the data and transforming and trying to bucket the data versus spending time looking at the data and creating insights and looking at trends.
Yep. I think mic drop on that. Austin, let me just get to a bit of the end of what people are looking out into 2024. So I've been talking to Digiday, I've been talking to Adweek, all of these guys out there, right? So there's one question which is obviously coming aboard saying that, hey, okay, we've seen the rise of AI being done this year on content creation, personalization, segmentation, behavior analysis, and all that stuff. But these are again on pretty much on a very creative end of the spectrum, or pretty much you're dealing with a lot of segmentation. You're looking at email and all that stuff. But when it comes to really helping in advertising, right? And when it comes to dealing with problems like, predictive stuff when it comes to, hey, okay, I have a 100K budget. I want to spend it for the next 6 months. I want to be looking at, primarily these channels, these campaigns back again, and maybe test for 20% of it going on to experiments. But I don't want to spend too much, or I don't want to waste all of that money, right? So there's a lot of problems, and people want to question their own data moving forward. But I think people want to be fast in this. I don't know, because of this entire thing of AI coming in, people want to move fast in this. And there is a lot of, I think, opportunity here. Applying all those traditional concepts and really, you know, like bring that tech flavor to it, and productize the entire thing. And in the end, also agencies really will benefit from this, because they can move fast when it comes to serving their clients and getting those outputs. So all in all, it's great for brands and agencies. But where do we stand right now in terms of, like, larger organizations really adopting AI for doing a lot of predictive stuff when it comes to running their campaigns, or budget allocation, all of that stuff.
Yeah, so I think I do think we'll see advancements in data clean rooms, embracing artificial intelligence and data modeling. All the walled gardens, all the retail media networks are really investing or really looking into this and figuring out how they can go about it. And then you'll see a lot of smaller, emerging very AI-driven organizations come into market. I would caution companies right now in terms of, I think, move forward with leveraging AI and experimenting with it. However, again, I'm going to go back to, you need to audit and make sure that you have your data sets properly set up and organized. Are you actually labeling it, using proper nomenclatures, doing those match tables? And then having the analytics team or the teams themselves look at the quality of the data that you're collecting. So if, for example, if you have a campaign that you're supposed to be running all on desktop, but then in your reporting through the ad server, you actually see that a good majority is running on mobile, well, then your data set's going to be wrong, right? If you're going to rely on your naming convention in your placement name. So you're going to have to do an audit of all of that. Look at where you're running your campaigns first off. Like, so if you're running heavily on Android devices, but not on Apple iOS, then the results of the AI is not going to help you on how to optimize your campaigns for Apple iOS users, right? Mm-hmm. So it comes back to making sure that your data set has full representation of where you're running and that it's accurate. So looking at both what was humanly entered versus what was captured through the supply chain and through the data signals to ensure that that looks right. Number two is to then to ensure that that you have your campaigns exactly, accurate enough to what you actually want to see, so that there's no bias, right? Are you running, if you think you're running against general population, national US, just know that a good percentage of your inventory is probably being delivered to New York and California, even though you might have a national campaign, right? Because that's where the highest populations are. So if you think that your reports are representative of everyone that's also converting in the middle of the country, it's not. And you may want to ensure that you segment your data, because otherwise the AI is going to use what you have and make assumptions off of that, right? So, but I do think that the people that you're going to have to hire needs to be privacy centric. So they have to have very good knowledge of what the privacy regulations and laws are. Number two, they have to be technically savvy. So understand what are the different challenges and different capabilities of what that leads to the types of data signals that you get. Information that you can get from CTV is not the same that you can get from mobile devices. And it's not the same as you can get from a laptop or a desktop. And there are limitations to how ads are being measured or counted. Digital out of home, a very good example, right? You talked about that, right? how do you count an individual in that environment? How do you count, and all that stuff. So you need to make sure that your data is aligned and that you're using the proper, like, are you actually counting people or are you counting households? And if you're counting different audience segments, AI will, I can't speak about what specifically, what types of platforms to actually go to. I think you're going to see a plethora of different solutions. You're going to have to test and learn. But what you want are expertise internally within your organization. And if you have an agency, as well as that organization, that are privacy centric, technically savvy. And then the third, I would say, is great AI prompters, right? AI is not going to replace your team. AI is not going to replace your agency. What it will do is make those teams more efficient in getting results and providing you with recommendations, but it should not replace the work and the human element of what makes sense, right? Because the AI will be able to do that.
Awesome.
And Rodney's right. Garbage in, garbage out. That's it. It's so true.
Yeah. So just one more thing, on top of my head, like when it comes to the marginal error in terms of data sanctity, right? This is where, you'll have a lot of people maintain the data and other people trying to figure out the sanctity of it or the accuracy of it. Now, with a lot of data with you, I know I really can't even trust that person as well, who's trying to bring in the accuracy of the meter to the data. So that's where I always feel like we could see that, okay, can AI do this job much better than that person, right? Just a random question. What do you think about that?
Well, if you're hiring, if your team is predominantly 25-year-olds, then I completely agree with that, right? But if you, I mean, this is such a hard question, right? I mean, I think it's knowing your team, having conversations with them. They should be, not to promote IAB stuff, but like, we host a lot of webinars. We have a lot of training. Well, we have committees, working groups, and task force. And this is where, as a really good example, I have a attention task force. So that is not something we just talked about here, but I have an attention task force where attention measurement is becoming, coming into the foreground in terms of companies wanting to understand if consumers are actually paying attention to the ads and how this relates to outcomes. However, there are different methods of measuring attention. There's biometric, right? So heart rate, blood pressure, skin sensitivity, gamma waves, EEG scans. There's visual observation. So eye tracking, facial recognition, is the person in the room. Then you have data signals coming from the device or being passed through from the publisher. And then you have your cognitive, your emotional, what I typically consider like your brand health studies, your ad effectiveness studies, your focus groups. So there are 4 different ways of measuring attention, and every single vendor is very different. And this is where, in this task force, right, we have over 200 members, where they hear from each other, they learn from each other. We share out information. We do webinars like this, right, to educate them. If your team is so focused on doing their day job, and which they should, right? But doing their day job, but in a vacuum, and they're just generating campaigns one after the other and focusing on internal politics or internal team management, but they're not attending events, they're not speaking at events, they're not participating in trade association, then what you're doing is you're basically fostering a lack of growth, right? And you can learn so much from hearing what other people are doing, what other people are thinking. And so I encourage, it doesn't have to be IAB, right? But there are several other trade associations out there. There's networking events. There's conferences that your directors, right? So people 5 years into should be attending it. Directors, supervisors, VPs. This should not just be your executive team attending these conferences. So if you want your team to really understand how to optimize campaigns, what are the latest trends, what they should be exploring, then they need to attend these events.
I agree, and I think it needs to be more workshop driven as well. But yeah, there's another conversation we can have another day. Thank you so much, Angelina. This has been an amazing conversation. Folks, I hope you'll love this. Hope with all of this, you're pretty much ready or getting ready for 2024. Please feel free to reach out to her if you want to chat more about what you're doing and any sort of problems you're solving. IAB is doing some amazing job in pretty much helping out brands, agencies in the space. And yeah, we are here as well, family, to help you out with providing that stack that Angelina was talking about in terms of maintaining that one media stack, understanding where to put in your money, understanding, in terms of how do you maintain that data sanctity and single source of truth. So yeah, feel free to check out what we do. And we are also on a mission to primarily help advertisers and media buyers uh, uh, become better decision makers, become better marketers, and also spend more time in the creative arena rather than doing all of these data work, which tools and smarter people can do that for you. So yeah, that's the end of the day. Andrea, any last word before we end? Because this is going to be pretty much our last event for this year. So we want to end this on a good note, and it should come from you.
Yeah, I would say, especially pay attention to if you didn't think that the deprecation of cookies was going to happen, it will likely happen. Might not be fully in 2024, but your team should be completely leaning into at least understanding all the changes that are happening with Privacy Sandbox. Get them to follow, different people on LinkedIn about what changes are happening with privacy regulations, and start having conversations internally. Create a task force between your legal and compliance, your marketing team, your operations team, your IT team, on what could potentially be the impact for your organization if you don't. Think about all these things that are happening externally that will be affecting us all internally, financially, economically, logistically, operation. Like all of those things are going to change. Your business is going to change starting in 2024.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Okay, everyone. Hope you all had a great year. Before I'm saying Happy New Year already to all of you who have joined in. Have a great December, the holiday season. Spend time with family. Learn a lot. Set your foundations right for coming back and getting your business on a great note in 2024. And we are here even next year with all the muscles, all the weapons, and all the wisdom and knowledge needed for you to sail this boat. Have a great week, everyone. See ya.
Thank you.